Hi everyone, this is Danielle Harris. You guys may know me from the Halloween franchise and most recently my film Camp Cold Brook. So we all know that TV and film start with an idea and then a script, but what comes next? Today's panelists, representing some of the top talent working behind the screens, will tell you all about the process from script to screen for today's Comic-Con at-home panel. So today's panelists, representing some of the top talent working behind the scenes, will tell you about the process from script to screen for today's Comic-Con at-home panel. Okay, first up, he scored a film which I starred in, Camp Cold Brook. Welcome, composer Chad Rehmann.
Hi, thanks Danielle, great to be here.
Next, he is responsible for the signature look in Elizabeth Moss's Handmaid tale. Welcome, makeup designer Burton LeBlanc.
Hi, how you doing?
Hi, good morning, how are you?
Morning, good.
Next up, from the hit horror film that became America's #1 film most recently, The Wretched, welcome composer Devin Burrows.
Hey everybody, super excited to be here.
Next up, from shows like Jessica Jones, The Punisher, and Pandora, welcome screenwriter, director, and editor Tirsa Hackshaw.
Hello, good to see everybody.
Hey, how are you?
Next, he created music for Netflix's Green Door and the video game Fantastic Creatures. Welcome composer Ian Chen.
Hello. Hey, great to be here.
Finally, she is an award-winning cinematographer behind Netflix's Anne with an E and the film Disappearance at Clifton Hill. Welcome cinematographer Catherine Lutes.
Hello.
Catherine.
Hi.
Hi. Welcome everyone. So here's a question for all of you. What movie or TV show first inspired you to pursue a career in entertainment? Let's start with Catherine.
I don't know if it was the first one, but I feel like there was a time period when I was a teenager, which is going to reveal my age, but where I got a little bit, my eyes opened up to a different kind of filmmaking from, I'll just name a couple, but it was Natural Born Killers, which now I don't know that I would look back on and love as a film, but it just was like blew my mind that that's how a movie could be. So sort of around that time, Natural Born Killers, Gummo, and then a few years later, Requiem for a Dream were all films that kind of kept pushing me to be like, I want to make things like that.
I think I don't really know if there's a single one, but I've always loved listening to soundtracks. And I think my very first one was probably James Horner's The Land Before Time or An American Tale, like those. But also, since I grew up in Taiwan, I also loved listening to Asian composers like Ryuichi Sakamoto or Joe Hisaishi or Tan Dun, and I think those are my influences.
Burton, what about you?
For me, I think it's watching the transformations on shows like SNL, Saturday Night Live, just seeing all these different characters come to life in different skits, just really grabbed me as a kid. That show's been on forever. And I think that was probably the one that stands out the most, Saturday Night Live.
Do you still get inspiration from those when you watch them now?
I still do. Yeah, I still love that show to this day. I mean, I love obviously the comedy and the sketches, but the makeup and, they've won tons of awards and it's a great show. I still get inspiration from it.
Devin, what about you?
My friends and I used to have sleepovers when we were kids, and we were nerds. This is before being a nerd was sort of, commonplace and accepted as being cool in mainstream culture. And we used to watch old episodes of The Twilight Zone and The Outer Limits. And I think that was sort of a formative education in sci-fi and fantasy and storytelling. And the music, especially Bernard Herrmann's music for The Twilight Zone, still inspires me to this day.
Tirsa, what do you think?
I don't know. It's a tough question because I didn't grow up wanting to be in entertainment or wanting this career at all. I fell into this career, literally. Well, not literally, but pretty close. And I got this random internship at Lucasfilm, but around the same time I was there, and that opened my eyes to filmmaking itself. I had really no idea. But around the same time, and here I am dating myself, I saw Glory, Denzel Washington and Matthew Broderick, and it was a free, college screening. So it was before the show, all of these college kids, free, drunk, raucous, whatever. And when the movie ended, you could drop a pin in that place. I mean, people were effing gutted. And I think that was the first time that I kind of realized, like before that, movies, obviously you love movies, but movies they're fun. What you do with your friends, Saturday night. But like, I think that was the first time, or one of the first times I kind of felt like the power of movies and like, began to respect it and understand that, that in conjunction with this internship, like it could be something else, and something real, like something as real as medicine. So I think that kind of started me down something.
Burton, let's talk a little bit about the physical look of the characters that you create for The Handmaid's Tale. So how do you approach it? How do you get the looks just right for where they need to be to tell that particular character story?
Well, obviously after all the, the meetings with the higher ups, producers and director and the actors, obviously too, they have their own ideas. So you come together and you talk and discuss, and then you do what you feel like is right for the character. But Handmaid's Tale obviously is all about realism, and it's all like, you don't want to see the makeup. You want to keep it. So I do what I feel like is right in the trailer, but then I'm never quite happy till we get to set, and everything's got to be tweaked with the, with the lighting there. And so, yeah, it's a constant adjustment until they actually start shooting the cameras. That's when I've continuously tweaked up to that point.
Oh, how I miss the makeup trailer, I have to tell you. I miss the conversations in the makeup trailer.
Yeah, everything comes together, and there's a lot going on there in the morning.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So Ian, you've had the opportunity to score music for TV series like Netflix's Green Door and video games like Fantastic Creatures. Is the scoring process different between the two mediums, and what's the same about them?
I think fundamentally it's pretty similar. You start by examining the themes and characters and the stories, in order to find inspirations for the different new sounds or new thematic materials, which will in turn create the new worlds, the emotional tone and the sonic scape for the different worlds. But I think the difference is that for video games, well, first of all, you get a lot more time to write the music for video games, usually like a few months sometimes, which is crazy in the TV world. But also you tend to approach the music in a more top-down way or big picture. Whereas for TV, the overall theme is important, but also what's very important is for each scene, you have to be able to draw the emotional beats, and everything is timed specifically to the edits. So that's the difference, I think.
Are you a gamer?
Yeah, I play games. Yeah. Okay,
so Tirsa, so you are a triple threat. So you work as an editor and a director and a screenwriter. How do your experiences in each role help you to be a creative successful behind the camera?
Well, okay, so, it's basically the three sides of the same coin, right? And like everybody up here, like the coin is storytelling. Everybody up here, all of these roles, they're all interrelated because they all have the same purpose. They have the same goal. We're all storytelling, through our craft, essentially. And all of our goals are the same: to tell the best story, to help the best story get told on camera. So they're all the three roles that I've done. And like, I came from editing. And so I can say this, very certainly that, being an editor first, I think definitely made me a much better writer and director. It's just inherent because, like, specifically, I mean, like, on a granular sense, as many people up here know, fix it and post is a real thing. I mean, that's a real thing. So spend any amount of time. And I think anyone who wants to become a writer or director, you should try to do other roles also, because it will give you a greater understanding and it'll make you better. So, spend any time fixing other people's problems will make you learn what works and what doesn't work. And that sort of knowledge, it becomes second nature, and that sort of knowledge is invaluable on set. Because as we all know, on set is time management. 1,000% of your job as a director is time management. And, it's fantastic that you want to get 1,000 shots, but having been an editor first, no, it's great. They have a techno cream, fantastic. But at the end of the day, like, I know I need this, this, and that. And then if the day is going south, which can happen, then even more importantly, I know how to cheat. I know because in 36 hours, someone just like me is going to be getting this footage and being like, what am I supposed to do with this?
Right.
And I know, well, what would I need in that moment? And then I can just get that on set right then. Doing other roles and knowing other parts of the process helps because, like, for instance, being an editor, especially a television editor, like I'm intimately aware of the notes process. Editors get notes. That's the way it is. That process, and even though it's soul killing and destroying at times, it's very useful to know because then as a writer and director, I know I wrote this, I shot this, I know exactly what's going to happen to that scene. I know how many people are going to be looking at that, weighing in on it, changing it, and the psychology and the politics behind the notes process, which actually makes it less painful. Because half the time the notes aren't even about the content. The notes are about something else that's happening. And so being an editor, you learn how to take a note, which is almost as important as anything else because you know how to react to it. You know how to push back. You know how to engage, whatever, Jedi mind tricks that, inception the note giver into thinking your note is their note.
Right.
All of those skills are really, really important, in all the other realms. Being an editor first, also bakes in a sort of like a sort of practical objectivity. It doesn't let you fall in love with your own work because, someone just like me will cut it out later if it doesn't serve the story. And so, you fall in love, obviously you still fight for things, but you still have a little bit of distance. And because you do someone else's role, I think, collaboration is all about trust, right? We all need to trust that the other co-collaborators are genuine co-creators, that there's no alternative agenda, that they're really there to support the same story that you're there to support. And I can picture myself in those other places. So I think, not just being an editor, director, or writer, but being anything and then also doing something else, because you've had that experience, you trust easier, I think.
As an actress, I have to tell you, I get very excited when I know an editor is going to be the director.
Not a lot of waste of time, right?
Thank God. They're just going to get what we need and we're going to move on. So it's fantastic. It's the way the mind works. It's just a completely different experience. Let's talk to Chad for a minute. So we both worked on Camp Cold Brook.
Yep.
How did you approach the score process? I know our director Andy and Joe Dante, for those of you who don't know, is the executive producer who I'm a fan at heart. Was there a favorite scene that I was in that you enjoyed scoring the most out of the entire movie?
There is this Danielle's character and all the characters go into this camp skeptics, right? They don't think they're going to see anything. They think all the ghost stories, aren't real. And about a third of the way through the film, I think, Danielle sees a ghost kind of for the first time on the screen. And one of the cool things is even though she doesn't say much, you can just see in her face and her character go from skeptic to just absolute terror in a matter of like 20, 30 seconds. And it's always cool when an actor or actress can do that without saying much. But selfishly, the fun thing as a composer is then we get to score it and there's no audio or anything else in the way that we have to work around. And we can kind of just kind of go under her action, not get in her way, but not have sound effects and dialogue and all this kind of stuff that we have to fight to do. And then at the end, there are creepy kids and swing sets and all this kind of stuff. And Danielle loses her mind. And, whenever an actress and whenever scenes start doing that, start going down rabbit holes, that's kind of always fun for the composer to add to that chaos.
I've directed as well, and one of my favorite things is actually working on the music in post. It changes the entire feel of the movie.
Hopefully for the better.
Not always.
Not always.
But yes.
Not always.
So let's chat with Catherine for a minute. So you've helped set the look for Anne with an E for Netflix series, which you won a Canadian Screen Award for. Congratulations.
Thank you. Yep, a weird pandemic win because they couldn't have the awards show, which is probably good because I would have been too nervous to go on stage anyway. But
can you tell me a little bit about the approach for the cinematography for the series?
Yeah, so I just did the last season and there were a couple other seasons before. So I took that as like a starting point to go from what the other DPs had kind of laid down, and which was great. The showrunner, who is amazing, she was very open to change and evolving the look to move with the storyline. So that was amazing because we didn't have to abide by rules of previous seasons, and we kind of didn't. So I kind of went with just really wanting to instill like a sense of this character, and she sort of sees the world through a magical lens so often. She's like inquisitive, and you know, her word is romantical and all these things. So I really wanted to bring a sense of that when we were in Anne's space, how we do that through camera movement or through special highlighting of lighting, a little bit harder lighting than before, which I was able to get away with because in previous seasons, they'd also been shooting primarily winter. And I was looking at now the stories that were taking place in the summer. So it really allowed me to bring in like an emotional push using sunlight and hard sun and kind of like interesting splashes and slashes along characters. I always tried to come from like the emotional place of the characters and bring that into it.
Very cool. It's a fantastic show.
Yeah, it's a fun one.
Let's chat with Devin for a little bit. So The Wretched, which I have not seen yet, you blend two different types of music. You blend like an orchestral and folk instruments, which is really interesting. What inspired you to create, blend the two and use those for in this particular horror film?
Yeah, it was a really fun process. I'm always experimenting with new sounds. Mm-hmm. And, you know, The Wretched is a horror film, of course. It's sort of a supernatural horror film, but it's also a bit of a throwback to thrillers like Rear Window and action movies like, fun action movies like E.T. So the tone was quite varied. And the directors really wanted a distinctive sonic character for the score of this film, especially for locations like the woods, the location that this witch antagonist comes from. So the directors, the Pierce brothers, came over to my place, and we had sort of a musical instrument casting call. And I spread out a bunch of instruments. I put out, you know, some folk instruments, waterphone and bowed psaltery. And they fell in love with the sarangi, which is an Indian bowed instrument. And we altered it a bit so that it had a very throaty, kind of dry sound. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I think it really helps transport people into the locations a bit, into the woods. And along with the orchestra, it helped us create the unique sonic tapestry that we were looking for.
And you were saying earlier, we were chatting and you were talking about how you saw the film in the drive-in. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, it was a blast. So The Wretched took the drive-ins this summer, man. I mean, it was kind of a surprise to everybody, but it was the top film for several weeks at drive-ins where people can safely social distance. And yeah, I was able to sneak out and see it at the Mission Tiki Drive-In in the Pomona Valley. And what an exciting experience. That's one of the most gratifying things about writing music for film. It's like being there with the fans and experiencing it and watching it. And yeah, it was really cool. People were honking their horns and clapping by the end. So it was a fun experience.
So this actually is a question for all of you, considering this fun time that we're all having. As artists, are there any particular nonprofits or causes that you all are passionate about right now? Let's start with Ian.
I think for me personally, growing up in Taiwan, I'm always aware of, you know, our big neighbor China and the various human rights issues there. So for me, I love working on films that bring awareness to social issues. So for example, my very first film that I did was a documentary called The Trail from Xinjiang, which talks about human trafficking issues in China. And actually this year I just did an animated film called Ragdoll, which talks about government persecutions and suppression of certain religions and minority groups there. So that's what I've tried to bring awareness to.
Tirsa, what are you passionate about right now?
Well, I'm a member of Women in Film, which is a great group. People should check out. And so I've always been an advocate, obviously, for that. And then in my own, in my own work and stuff, like if I ever have the power to bring people in, that's what like somebody brought me in, like that's how this is all supposed to work. So the idea of opening doors and bringing people in and, maybe putting a spotlight on, somebody that might not have had the chance to shine, or, they don't have that, whatever it is. They don't have like the $50,000 short coming out of like, a prestigious film school, but they have talent, and more than talent, they have drive. Lifting that up and recognizing that is really important. I have an upcoming feature that's sort of in the financing and the funding stage. And, it's about a sort of a controversial subject in like the Hispanic community, but like we've made an effort that, my entire behind the scenes cast and crew, we're all women. I shouldn't say cast and crew, but crew for sure. Cast obviously has male roles in it, but, we're all women. Most of us are Latina. And then beyond that, even like we're trying to make sure that we shoot the movie either in Puerto Rico, and we score the movie in Puerto Rico, because, even before COVID, their economy has been wrecked, since the hurricane. And, making a movie is like having a small army. And it's nice to be able to bring jobs and money to places that could really use it. So, it's fantastic to go to Atlanta. It's fantastic to go to Vancouver. But there are other ways to, lift up communities that are not necessarily just about central casting, or making sure your script doesn't have like some offensive black scent or something. You can do it on a granular level in the actual production arena as well.
Catherine, what are you focused on right now?
Because we're all not really working right now, and what's going on in the world with like us being, so aware of the issues of racial injustice, I'm kind of trying to take the time to learn and look at that and look at how we can kind of bring it into our own industry. And, I might not personally be able to make the huge change in the world, but there's a world that I can, make a ripple in, and that's on our film sets. And so working in our, in the Toronto community currently to kind of put some new programs into place, maybe some funding structures. So I've been spending a lot of time talking with our community and trying to kind of figure out what we can do to just make some improvements overall. I think it's a crazy time right now, but it's also like a lot of us have free time. So why not, educate and try and do as much as we can, because we know that when we start working and we're on TV shows and films, it's so easy to forget about everything else. And we need to be better at, making it a equally diverse community. And
Chad, what about you?
For me, it's mental health. My wife is works in the mental health field, and so it's always been something that I've kind of learned about, even just through hearing about her work. But especially in the creative field, I bet every one of us has, met somebody in our field that has, been impacted with some sort of, mental health issue that they're dealing with. There's a lot of isolation, especially for people in post-production, that we have to go through. And, there's just constant rejection in the industry. There's that to deal with. So, our local community, we support some mental health initiatives, but just because of, my wife's work and being a composer and a creative, it's tough. It's a marathon. And it's a lot of just rejection and dealing with that, and, ego and notes and, especially the climate today, everything that's going on, mental health impacts that and is impacted by that. So that's where our focus is.
Well, let's switch it up a little bit. On a lighter note for a moment. It's a happy time we're all in. So one of the great things about making films is the ability to escape into fantasy, which is why we all love film. For me especially. So let's talk to Burton and Tirsa and Catherine. So you've worked on an offset on a variety of genre-fueled and superpowered projects. Can you guys talk a little bit about your favorite parts of actually working with alternate realities?
You know, genre stuff is fun. It's awesome. It's a good time. I mean, you know, I will definitely always gravitate towards a dark genre thing, you know, over cutting yet another interrogation scene on CSI. Like, it's just not gonna equal out. So yeah, I mean, it's fun. People can fly, you can disappear. What's really fun about genre shows are villains. These villains get to be really villainous, and it's a delight sometimes. I mean, it's like, I enjoy the hell out of cutting David Tennant as Kilgrave, because, oh my God, I mean, he was fantastic. Jessica, Kristen rather, was fantastic. And they both brought it, and they went for it. And it was a delight to be part of. I mean, likewise, I loved cutting Mahershala and Alfre Woodard and Luke Cage, because they're delicious, and they get to be delicious.
I want to be a villain. I'm always the victim. It'd be fun to not be covered in blood. I want to kill people and do bad, evil, disturbing things, not having to be the final girl all the time. It's exhausting. Burton, what do you think about that?
I completely agree. Just letting your imagination go completely wild and be able to do anything, you know, blood or like using makeup to do basically anything you want to do. It's not the norm, which is completely fun, like out of the ordinary. And especially now when I'm doing Handmaids now, it's all realism and realistic. So to go back to that, it's like a perfect opposite end of the spectrum. So I love that stuff.
Now, to our composers, what is your first step when you begin to score? Are you already thinking about it when you're reading the film, or are you waiting to see what's actually on film?
For me, I like to marinate in it a little bit before I even start to write anything. You know, reading the script is always great. Being able to have numerous conversations with the director and producer before the clock starts ticking is always a benefit. For me, I'll have those conversations and I'll watch the film, you know, 2, 3, 4 times. And then, to be honest, I take a day off if I can, because I used to just jump right into writing. And every single project I've done that, I get to the end of the day or the end of the couple of days and everything, like, I don't like anything about it. And I think it's because I haven't had time to kind of internalize the characters. I haven't had time to really think about the project. And to be able, I've kind of started to respect that a lot of my process does take place, you know, away from the piano or away from the computer. I could spend days plunking away at stuff, but then the greatest idea will come on a walk or right before I fall asleep. And it's those days when I'm kind of away from the process that all of a sudden things start clicking. I see a lot of nodding, so I'm glad.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. Absolutely. I think for me it's the same. A lot of good ideas come from just thinking about the story, not being from the computer. But also for me, I think the very first step is to delve into the story, understand the theme, the characters, and then talk to the filmmakers and directors and make sure that you're on the same page, because that is so important. Like, you can have your own idea, but if it's different, then it doesn't work. So yeah, and sometimes because we come in so late in the process, that the film might have changed while it's being made, and so when we come in late, we bring in new perspective to the filmmakers as well, which is really cool.
Yeah. I worked on a film a couple of years ago, that a horror film that was completely rewritten on day 2 on set, and it went from this psychological thriller to a comedy, unbeknownst to some of the actors. So I totally understand how what you read and what you see are 2 totally different things.
Right.
What about you, Devin? What's that like? What's that process like for you?
It's interesting. I think each project is unique and different, and I don't think there's one sort of formula necessarily. For the Wretched, it started really early. They sent me drafts of the script, and I would come up with some themes and motifs and send them some mock-ups, and this kind of wonderful feedback loop started, whereby we started sharing ideas really early to get the tone of the film just right.
Well, I will always make sure my composers get a script from the beginning when I'm directing. I obviously I do a lot of genre films, so I understand how long days on sets can be, unfortunately, for the most part. It's obviously it's a labor of love. We wouldn't do this if we didn't love what we did. What do you guys find is the most fulfilling part of your job? Let's start with Devin.
Wow. I think for The Wretched, without a doubt, it was being in the audience and watching the film, the finished product, with fans in theaters, on the festival circuit and then at the drive-in. I mean, there are a number of really gratifying things about writing music. It's like a dream come true in a lot of ways, but I think experiencing it with fans still makes my heart tremble. So
it's the best, right? I mean, when you're watching your work in a room full of other industry people, it's a little bit more difficult to get the full experience. When you're watching it with regular folk, right, who are just just engulfed in the experience and forgetting about all the technical parts, it really is an amazing feeling.
Yeah, it can be really intense and fun.
What advice do you have for, we've touched on this a little bit, for aspiring creatives and entertainment professionals that could be watching this? I know it's kind of a broad question, but let's start with Chad. What advice do you have?
Yeah, I said this before, but just to realize it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. And, for composers especially, if you don't want to fail in year 1 or 2 or 5 or 6, you have to start thinking of yourself like a small business owner. Project out your income and expenses, take advantage of networking opportunities, find creative marketing solutions. I think, too many times we get in this mode where it's, I write great music, somebody will find out about me. We have to think of ourselves as plumbers or carpenters or auto mechanics. We have a skill and we need clients. And so, what does that look like? If I had to go back and change something about my education, I would have taken a summer and just taken a business 101 course. Because I think we all kind of just fall into these, these ways of doing things, and having a business course would have been very, very helpful starting out. And also I think getting involved with something other than the industry, whether that's volunteering somewhere, being active in community organizations, golf leagues, softball, something that allows you to kind of connect outside the industry. I think, I talked about mental health before, but I think that goes a long way towards just kind of keeping your sanity. And also, I think you'd be amazed. Some of the best connections I've made have been outside of industry events, just people who I've met through various activities that have nothing to do with, the music and film industries.
Catherine, what about you? As an actress, I myself, unfortunately, have never worked with a female DP. What do you suggest for other young women wanting to break into your particular field?
I think one thing is, and it's kind of terrible to say, but you kind of have to have a thick skin about some of that stuff. You can't really take it personally. You can't, you've got to just keep moving and pushing forward. But I think, I had kind of wished when I finished school that someone had told me that there's not one path to success, because I finished and I was like, I want to be a cinematographer, and now what's the logical step? So many other jobs have this clear-cut way to move up a ladder, and I think in film there's so many ways in, and you got to just follow which one works for you, maybe make some wrong turns along the way and come back, and part of that is kind of staying true to yourself, I think, and what you want to do, the kind of projects you want to make, and not trying too hard to fit in somewhere that you think will be good or you think is just lucrative, because sometimes that doesn't really work out,
Anybody who's been in this business quite a while have kind of gone forward a bit, gone back, gone forward.
Yeah.
Everybody didn't agree on that one. So I think they have to learn. I think it's a hard fail and then go from there, and then success eventually comes, I think, from it.
Yeah, I completely agree. I would say, for me, I know it's cliche, but, for every couple steps back that I took, for every failure, it just teaches you something. And, there's a lot of noise out there. And so for people to think, oh, I'll just release a song or I'll just release this, failure is just part of the process. Rejection is just part of the process. And until you're ready to go through that, you might not be ready to, try to achieve the dream, because it's just, it's a journey. And I think anybody going into this that thinks, oh, I do X well, so within a year I'll have this, it just, it doesn't work that way. I'm sure many of us, it just took us years just to be able to kind of end that second job that we had. You have to do what you do to survive, and you work on your craft, and hopefully one year you get to make that transition to doing it full time. But good for you if you did it overnight, but I think it's the exception.
I can't stress enough the importance of saying yes. Like, keep saying yes. It's very easy to, like, somebody offers you something or you hear about something and you're like, I'm not, like, you, like, maybe you hate rom-coms, you're like, I'm going to be like the next Matrix person. Like, I don't have any connection to that. Like, say yes. Like, opportunities. First of all, you might be the next rom-com king. Honestly, you don't know that. And B, doing something and saying yes to an opportunity, all experience is good experience. If you say yes to something you have no interest in, connection to, knowledge about, you will learn how to find inspiration in something you have no connection to, interest in. And that's a skill. Don't let that go by, because no matter what, you will learn something. And even more than that, kind of like what other people were saying, it's a true thing. Like, your network is your net worth. Like, you don't know who else is going to be on this, like, whatever horrible rom-com that you're shooting in your mother's basement. Right. You don't know. Right. And 4 years down the line, maybe not even that long, they might be somebody or into something else, and they might be like, yeah, hey, remember that thing that we did? Yeah, it was horrible, but they were good. And they worked really hard. What are they up to? You'd be surprised how often decisions are made like that. How often somebody picks up the phone based on nothing that you thought was going to lead anywhere. Say yes.
I did a little teeny tiny part in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, because I just have always wanted to work with Tarantino, and I was very, 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 very pregnant, and he just wrote a little something in, and there was another actress on set that didn't have had no dialogue, but was there, and we were having a conversation about how she didn't know if she wanted to be part of it because she didn't have a real part. And I thought, oh my God, I would do craft service on Quentin Tarantino's movie. I'll clean out his trailer. I mean, I just to be a part of that, because I'm learning so much from watching everything that's going on around me, and just to be a part of that process, it's just yeah, I would do craft service. So I definitely agree with you on saying yes to lots of things, because you just never know what's going to come out of it. Are there any projects or experiences that were your career highlights? I know we've talked about, starting and then having to go back and starting over again. And what was each of your career highlights, your high point? Let's start with Catherine.
Just on what we were talking about of sort of taking certain experiences, I did a super low budget feature film a couple years ago called Firecrackers. And it was just because I felt like connection to the script and the director, and it was the lowest budget feature I've ever done, but it was the most satisfying and one of the more successful projects. And the feeling on set with like a very true collaboration and with the actors, with the director and everybody just felt so amazing that I kind of keep that in my heart, where I'm like, you don't need all the bells and whistles all the time to make something that's amazing and that you have an amazing time doing. And that's another thing too, is working with people. We put a lot of our time into this. So you want to work with nice people that you get along with,
And you keep that list of people that aren't nice, right?
For me, I think, I did the original Big Fat Greek Wedding. I had like the best time on that.
Oh, amazing.
Director, yeah, a lot of fun. We laughed from morning until night. And once again, some really great people, really good people, great crew, great cast, and just a great time. That was back in 2002, 2003. But yeah, really great, fun project.
Ian, what about you? What's a career highlight for you?
Most recently, indie game that I did was nominated for Music of the Year at the Game Awards at the Game Developers Conference in San Francisco, and it was very crazy for me because it's an indie game, and all the other nominees were like AAA games and composers that I looked up to since I was a kid. So,
and Chad, I'm assuming, Chad, it was Camp Cold Brook. Was that your highlight?
You,
yes.
A close second, though, is maybe I could speak for all of us, maybe not. And this is going to sound, I think the first time you see your name in the credits, it just becomes real. And it took place a little longer ago than I like to admit, but the first time you see it, it just makes all the bad days kind of worth it. Just to feel like I completed something, I set out a goal, I did something.
I know our industry is just sort of getting back on its feet as of this week. I was just reading the rules and regulations and guidelines. It's about 22 pages for our industry on what we need to do to be able to go back to work. It's pretty daunting, actually. Hopefully everyone's going to be back to work. I know a lot of projects, like Tirsa, you were saying, everything was kind of stopped or canceled or put on hold. If you guys can just go down the list, I'll start with Catherine. What are you working on now? What's next up for you?
Well, just before everything shut down, I had just started prep on the series for FX, Why the Last Man. So if all goes as planned, when things return, that's what I will be returning to. And I'm really looking forward to that. It's a super exciting challenge.
Ian, what about you? What's up next for you?
I just recently finished scoring for another Taiwanese TV show that's kind of Black Mirror-esque, and it should be coming up at the end of this year, and hopefully, well, it's set to be coming to the US on either Netflix or HBO. So.
Great. Burton, what about you? I know there was a lot of rules changing for what's going to go on in the makeup trailer, since you guys are so hands-on with us. What's up next for you?
Well, Handmaid's Tale, the same as Catherine. I was here in Toronto. We just started Handmaids 2 weeks into shooting when everything shut down March 13th. So season 4, Handmaid's Tale.
Tirsa, what are you working on right now?
Like I said before, like we had shot, I think 4 or 5 days, doing the reboot of Kung Fu for the CW, and then they pulled the plug on that. So that if that was actually a pilot, and then in the interim they decided to go straight to series. So it's definitely coming back. I just don't know when or where. And then on like the movie side, as I mentioned earlier, I'm in like the financing stage for a feature. I was hired to adapt and direct this movie called Unmerciful Good Fortune, starring Rosario Dawson, also being produced by her, which is fantastic, because you're talking about earlier about, what the creative community can do, to lift up people and, stuff like that, like A-list actors and stuff, backing projects, championing, things that used to just be called, passion projects. But now, are more passion social justice projects, or like things that are just marginalized, putting their weight behind it, get stuff made. And that's really fantastic. So like I said, we're in the financing stage of that. So we'll see, when that goes. I can't wait to start it. So hopefully soon.
Yes. Chad, what about you? What are you working on?
Thankfully, right before production shut down, I finished a new Christmas film that'll be out later this year. And we were able to I finished a really cool indie film called Obsidian Dolls. And we were able to get the recording session. Budapest was one of the few orchestras kind of around the country that was still operating when the whole COVID thing hit. So I was able to get the score recorded. And it was really interesting because they all had their masks on and the chairs were spread very far apart. But I was so thankful for them, because with everything shutting down, I didn't want to have to wait God knows how long.
Right.
Because we were right at the end of the process. So thankfully they were still open for a couple of weeks. We were able to get that under the wire. Yeah.
Devin, what about you? What do you have up next?
I'm preparing to release the original motion picture soundtrack of The Wretched. So super excited about that. And I'm also working on some music of my own, under the pressure of this COVID-19 creative quarantine. So I'll be releasing that as well.
Nice.
Well, I have nothing lined up. So if any of you are working on a project that you need an actress, I know of one that needs a job. Well, this has been really nice. This is the first time that I've had a conversation with somebody other than my 1.5-year-old and my 3-year-old. So I really enjoyed this, and you guys made my day. It was nice to talk to people in the industry. Oh, how I wish we were there at Comic-Con. But I think this will have to suffice for now. And I hope that everyone at home that's watching this got a little bit of something out of this and enjoyed it as much as I did. And I thank you all so much for your time. And looks like that's all the time that we have for today. I want to thank my panelists, Devin, Chad, Ian, Burton, Tirsa, Catherine, for being us here today and sharing your awesome stories and your words of wisdom. It's much appreciated. Also, big thank you to Impact24 PR for putting this panel together. A shout out to the ever amazing Comic-Con International team and for all of you at home watching. You can check out the social media handles below for our lovely panelists in the description. And please be sure to share your thoughts on social media using hashtag #ScriptToScreen and tag us at Impact24 PR. I am your host, Danielle Harris. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and I will see y'all next time.